Okay guys, let's think for a minute about what we've seen so far about validation. We've seen how to validate our Angular form. We've seen what are the properties we can check to see the status of each field. We've seen pristine, we've seen invalid, dirty, touched, and so on. We've seen how to apply a specific CSS class based on the status of our validation, and we've seen how to use ngClass. Well, there's something else we can do, and it will be thanks to the new ngMessages directive, which was introduced since Angular 1.3, and the ngMessages allows us to show to the user a specific message based on the rule that is breaking. So for example, if we have a field where we have multiple validation, like the name field, we have a field that is required, we have a minimum length of 3 characters and a maximum length of 50 characters. So instead of showing just one static message to the user that will tell him to enter an event name between 3 and 50 characters, it will be nice that when the field is empty, it will say this field is required. When the field is only 2 characters long, we will show the please enter an event name at least 3 characters long. And when the name is longer than 50 chars, we'll say something like the event name entered is too long. We didn't do that yet, right? So let's see how ngMessages works. The first thing we have to do is to include ngMessages in our index.html. And to do so, I'm grabbing that from the Angular code base, but you can also download the entire code on your system and add the local path. I'm grabbing the version 1.43 and the name of the script is angular-messages.js. We also need to inject this module, this dependency, in our main Angular application. Therefore, after ngRoute, I'll add another dependency, which is exactly ngMessages. And the setup is done. So now let's go back to our input name. Let's get rid of this hold message. We're going to add ngMessages. So the way it works, it's just a directive, an attribute one, but we can use also the element directive. We'll use the attribute way for now. So it will be div ng-messages. And what we need to enter as an expression is actually the following: add event form dot event name, and then we'll use an ngModel property that we always have, which is $error. This property is an object that contains information around the validity of our model, specifically the validity of our input field. Inside our ngMessages, we'll define the list of messages that we want to display to the user. So the first one will be div ngMessage. Notice that I've been using the plural to define when the validation should trigger, so whenever we have an error on a specific field. And I'm using the singular to define each one of my messages. So the first one will be required, and the message will be please, or better, the event name is required. The second one will be min length, in the same way that we define it in here. So just get rid of the ng dash, and your text will be min length and required. Please enter an event name at least 3 chars long. Okay? I missed the knee. So I can copy these, and we'll do the same for the max length. And we'll type the event name entered cannot be longer than 50 chars. Okay? So let's see what happens into our form. The first validation I'm seeing is the event name is required. And you already know how can I prevent the validation message from being displayed, right? I can simply add another rule, and it will be add event form dot name, event name, $30, and add event form, event name error. Nothing is being shown. As soon as I type, please enter an event name at least 3 characters long. Let's keep typing. The validation disappears. And let's try to go further than 50 chars. The event name entered cannot be longer than 50 chars. So that's basically it. There is another ngMessages feature that I would like to show you, and this allows us to define a generic template of messages that we can use on our fields. Let's see immediately how to do that. Well, it's very easy. On top of our add event, we can define our template, and that will be script type text / ng template. Okay, we need to give it an ID, and we'll call it error messages. And inside the script tags, we're going to define the default messages that we want to use in our form. So the first one will be div ng-message required. This field is required. Remember, this is a generic message that we're going to use in our input fields. And then we'll also define min length. I will type too short. In the same way, we'll define max length, and that will be too long. Okay? So let's see what happens now, but before doing that, we need to include those messages. And to do so, we're going to select this time our description field. We'll remove again the static validation, and we'll copy the ngMessages from the one we've done for our name. What we need to do is just to redefine it. So this time we'll check for the event description. Event description as well. But instead of defining the single message, we'll use a directive which is ng-messages-include and takes as input the ID we defined above. Therefore is error-messages. That should be sufficient, and let's see what happens. So if I now click on the description field, I'll type one letter and I remove it, so the status will be touched and there will be an error. This field is required, so the standard validation, the default template, is being applied. We have no minimum length, so this is all we'll see. Also, keep in mind that even if you define a standard template, you can always override it. And this means that if instead of typing only ngMessage include, you'll type above div ngMessage required with my own message, this will overrule the default template. Therefore, my own message will be what the user will see. Again, my own message. So keep that in mind. That's very useful in my opinion, because you can define your list of standard messages and use it where you need it, but you can also redefine the messages to be more specific to what you want to display to the user. This closes the chapter around the basic validation in Angular. Keep in mind that there is a more advanced way of dealing with validation, and that's by defining that in your services or controllers. You can interact, for example, with an HTTP service that will return to you the status of the validation. The username is a very good example. When the user is typing his own username during a registration process, the backend will check for the username in the database, and if that username does exist, it will return an error, and we will show to the user a specific validation saying this username is already been picked. And to do so, you'll use the $setValidity function in Angular. We're going to use that further on when it comes to advanced services. We're going to move into the filter section now, but before doing that, why don't you do a small exercise? As you might have seen, I didn't add the validation in each one of the fields, so why don't you do that? Anyways, I will attach the completed code in the upcoming section, but I would prefer that you guys do that so that you'll be sure that you don't have any questions. In case you have any, just get in touch and I'll be glad to help you.